Where were you born?
I was born in Oakland, California. I was raised in San Diego by my mom and my stepdad. I grew up with my brother and sister, eventually my parents divorced and was raised by a single mother.
What were your parents' or siblings' feelings about you joining the service?
As I said, my mom was a single parent, and I was the oldest of three, and she worked real hard to take care of us. So I basically joined the military for the purpose of, relieving my mom of the pressure of taking care of three kids. So by joining the military, I was able to get on with things and take care of myself, as opposed to having my mom take care of me and take care of the things. So I think there was some apprehension about me going, but at the same time, there was some relief. So it would be better for the family if one of us was able to go on and take care of ourselves.
What primary and secondary schools or college did you attend?
Well, I attended elementary school mostly in San Diego, and then high school in San Diego, Kearney High School in San Diego, California. And immediately after graduation is when I left for the military.
Did you hold any jobs before entering the service?
Yeah, I worked. I started working at a young age. I was at about 11, 12 years old. I had a paper route, and I worked that till I was about 14, 15, and I started working as a janitor at a local gas station, and then as janitor at a local grocery store, and then I ended up working as a clerk in a local retail facility. And I did jobs during the summer. I worked in the restaurant business sometimes and stuff like that. So I worked a lot when I was in high school, and kind of took care of those things.
Thank you. We're going to be diving into your early days of service. Can you tell us about when you went into the military? Were you drafted or did you enlist?
Well, by the time I went into the military, it was an all-volunteer military. So fortunately for us, we have a volunteer force now. So I of course volunteered. I volunteered for my service, and I joined the United States Air Force. I went to my basic training at Lackland Air Force Base in San Antonio, Texas, where everybody in the Air Force does their basic training. And that was in July of 1982.
What is your most vivid memory of your time training or in school? What was the best part?
I'm assuming we're talking about my time in school in the military. My most vivid memory of being, I guess my initial training was basic training. My most vivid memory was our last weekend in basic training during mail call. Our drill instructor, Tech Sergeant Ramirez, he was doing mail call. He's handing out mail. He's calling us all by name, and I'll never forget that as he was going through the mail, he called one of my flight mates' names, and when he called his name, he paused for a second. The flight chief, or my drill instructor, paused for a second and repeated the young man's name, and when he repeated his name, he said it like he didn't know who the young man was, and he asked, "Is this guy in the room?" And the young man answered that he was in the room, and he ordered the young man to stand up, and the young man stood up, and he asked the kid. He said, "Have you always been in my flight?" And the young man said, "Sir, yes, sir. I've always been in your flight." He goes, "You didn't get washed back? You didn't come from another flight?" "Sir, no, sir." He said, "You've been here from the beginning?" "Sir, yes, sir." He goes, "Psh." And my drill instructor said, "Boy, you guys could take a lesson from him. I don't know who he is." And that was our last day in basic training. So this young man had gone from the beginning of basic training till the end of basic training without the drill instructor ever realizing who he was. So he managed to fly below the radar, which was something I was not lucky enough to do.
Thank you, that was really good. Did you receive any specialized training? If so, what?
Well, in the Air Force, everybody receives specialized training. I was trained as a security police, and my initial training was the Security Police Academy. right out of basic training. And then from there, I was sent to another school called Air Base Ground Defense, or ABGD. In Security Police, in the Security Police Academy, you learn everything from personnel to base protection to resource protection. You learn your basic weapons, which was at that time the M16, the M203 grenade launcher, and the .38 pistol. From there, in Air Base Ground Defense, you learn ground tactics like infantry stuff. That's exterior base protection, things like that. You learn squad movements, basically how to operate as an infantryman. From there, I was sent to heavy weapons training, and my heavy weapons school taught me to use the 81 millimeter mortar. So I had an opportunity to become a mortarman. No idea why we had mortarmen in the Air Force. I was one of the few trained at it, and after my training as a mortarman, I never saw a mortar again during my entire career. So I thought it was kind of funny that I would be trained that and never see it again.
Okay. What was the hardest part of your training?
I think the most difficult part of my training was not the training itself, but was learning to be with personalities from all over the country, young men who had different experiences than I had grew up in a different lifestyle. It was interesting as well as difficult at times, because you live in close quarters with people who you begin with as strangers, and by the time you leave, you're brothers. So it's really a process, and it's a neat process to go through, but in the beginning can be very, very trying. But later on, they become some of your closest friends.
Okay. This next topic is wartime service. Where did you serve?
Well, wartime service is all relative. My time of service was during the time known as the Cold War. And as a teacher now, today, in the year 2019, it's funny to speak to students today because they've heard of the Cold War, but they really believe it was a war, a shooting war, which of course the Cold War was not. It was a war of, it was an arms race. It was a war of ideals between the United States and then the Soviet Union. There was active combat between Cold War nations, but it was indirect. Like an example of that would be the Soviet Union in Afghanistan and the United States in Vietnam. It was wars of ideals and things like that. My participation in any event like that didn't exist. I wasn't in either of those events. I'm far too young to be involved in Vietnam. And as far as the things that went on when I was active duty, I was involved in 2 incidents that was related to combat. It happened in Egypt and in Grenada, both in 1983. Nothing that was extreme as my involvement or anything like that. So there's no real war story to tell other than, being in some place and taking orders. I find it ironic that young people often will ask about combat experience when it comes to the military, when so few people who actually serve in uniform actually experience that type of event. As a teacher of history, it's funny when you look at you look at history, you look at movies and stories and stuff, and and I was victim of it too. There was a time when I thought that every male of fighting age in the United States wore a uniform and engaged Germans or Japanese during the Second World War. But in fact, that wasn't the case. My understanding is that about 70% of the fighting age males during the Second World War, Americans, did in fact wear the uniform of their country. And of those men who wore the uniform, 1 in 16 actually faced an enemy weapon. So even all of those people who were active duty military, very few of them where it was in active combat. Although, there was a lot of them who was in active combat, but there was also a lot of people who were serving. So most people serve in support roles and things like that. There's a lot of things that have to be done in order to, deal with an enemy and things like that. So a lot of support stuff. There's people there that's got to feed you, that's got to clothe you, that's got to take care of your medical, all that stuff. A lot of administrative stuff to do. So it's just, as a young person, you often equate the idea of going into the military with, I have to go to war, and it's just not true. Some people do experience that. That's unfortunate, but most of us don't.
What kinds of friendships and camaraderie did you form while serving, and with whom?
The friendships and camaraderie you form with those guys are lifetime friendships for, a few. It's my best friend in my life actually comes from my service in the military, and we didn't even do the same job. It just so happened we were stationed at the same base and met each other and could relate to one another, and we had similar experiences but not similar jobs. So we would go on to become, great friends. I'm still in contact with no less than about a dozen guys that I served with. And we have regular communications with each other. We visit with one another, maybe once every 2 years, 2 or 3 years. We live in different parts of the world now, but we are in regular contact with each other. So I have much more contact with the people I served with than I did the people I grew up with.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. What was the best part of your service experience?
The best part of my service experience, I guess, was learning how to take care of myself, learning the rules of adulting, being responsible, working on your personal integrity, being somebody that people could count on, people that people could rely on, and people understood that you were, clear and forthright. There's a lot of things in the military that helps you with that. The understanding too that you can't do it alone. You have to rely on others. We all have different skill sets and stuff, and you learn that real quick. From basic training, you find out who's really good at shining boots, and who's really good at making beds, and who's really good at sweeping and mopping and doing certain skills. So pretty soon you start realizing, well, I'm going to let these guys make my bed, and I'll shine their boots, because they do that well and I do this well. And so that's all about teamwork, so that everybody enjoys success. You work for success as a group, not as an individual.
Okay. Thank you. I believe we're going to move on to end of service. Do you recall the day service end? Where were you when your service ended?
Where was I when my service ended? Well, I was at perhaps my most miserable assignment. So the day my service ended was actually a pretty glorious day for me, because I was just tired of where I was. I was lucky enough to have served in a place, my after basic training, after my tech school, I got assigned to Grand Forks, North Dakota, and being a young man from San Diego, going to Grand Forks, North Dakota, to be honest with you, I wasn't even sure what country it was in, but it was shocking to go there. But I didn't spend much time there. I was temporary duty in a number of places because of my qualifications in air base ground defense and heavy weapons school. And then I was quickly reassigned to a place called RAF Greenham Common. And we had the ground launch cruise missile there, and it was a very political assignment. And I was there for more than 5 years, and that was an incredible place to be because of our exposure and the attention we got from politicians, as well as the American public and the NATO alliance. And so it was really neat, because in that area I really got to witness history. I got to be there as history was made. So that was a real exciting assignment, and I was there for a long time, and it was a lot of fun. And then I was sent to Dyess Air Force Base in Abilene, Texas, and it was just a big letdown, because I'd come from this place that was exciting and there was stuff going on all the time and a lot of things happening, and then I go to this place where nothing is happening, and the job is pretty boring, and things like that. And there had been people who had been stationed there for 12 years and things like that, and it was just so different for me. I had been injured in the line of duty a couple of times, and when I got to Texas, they did an evaluation of my injuries, and they had decided that my injuries were to the point to where the Air Force didn't want to take responsibility to fix them anymore. They decided to retire me. They offered me the opportunity to retire. It was basically a year after I'd been assigned there, and I accepted that opportunity to retire. And so on the 18th of December 1989 is when I rolled off station for the last time as a member of the United States Air Force. And although it was sad to leave the service, I was pretty happy, though, to get on with the next chapter in my life.
How were you received by your family and community coming home?
Well, I mean, when I'd come home, there, a lot of things had changed. My mother was no longer raising a couple of kids. They were moved out, and everybody was glad that I was home. But by that time I had served 8 years in the military, and so everybody was real used to the idea that I was a member of the military, and that was a big part of my life. So they were happy for me because I was happy for myself. So there was no I didn't see it as a big change for them, because I didn't come home and live at home. I came back to where I grew up, but I got my own place to live, and I dealt with my life my way. So very little change, other than the fact that I was available to my family locally now, as opposed to a long distance phone call. So I was received well.
How did you readjust to civilian life?
It's funny, because I was excited to be going back to civilian life, but probably my first year or two, I quickly adopted the attitude that civilians suck. They were disorganized, they were undisciplined, they were not interested in the things that were important. The things that interest a lot of civilians were things that just weren't important, or as the way I saw it at that point. It took a couple of years before I decided that, okay, this is life now, and this is how it works as an American. I still have some of the military ingrained upon me, but I understand, and I'm much more accepting of people for who they are, and that we're not all, we haven't all had the same experience, and so we can't be the same kind of person.
How did the service change you?
Well, like I already said, it brought a lot of discipline, regiment to my life, the understanding that you get up and you make your bed. That life is all about accomplishments, and the accomplishments are all kinds of accomplishments, like getting up and making your bed. I mean, making your bed first thing in the morning is an achievement. It's an accomplishment. Most people don't do it. To have the discipline to get up and go work out, or to get up and go work out, cook yourself breakfast, get yourself ready for work, arrive on time to work, be a reliable employee, be responsible for the people around you and to the people around you. All of that was introduced to me really and truly through my military experience, and I think it has brought that type of regiment to my life. And I think that people who experience me have little doubt as to who I am pretty quickly, and they understand. As a school teacher, I deal with students who come from all different households and environments and stuff like that. But I think they pretty much realize who I am pretty quickly and decide, he's a fair guy, he's a good guy. If you just do what you're supposed to do, he's gonna leave you alone and let you be. And I do. I give instruction, and if instruction is followed, we're okay. If instruction is not followed, a correction is made, and we'll see how it goes after that correction's made.
Just on a curious note, do you still make your bed today?
I do.
Every morning?
Unless my wife is in it, yeah. Yeah, but I smooth out my side. when she's still in bed. She's in bed most of the time that I'm not. But yes, as a matter of fact, this morning all they did was smooth my side, and I went to the gym. And then by the time I got back from the gym, my wife was up and she had made the rest. She had made the rest of the bed. So, but if she's out of the bed gets made right away. Yes.
Okay. Thank you. How did the service affect the way you relate to others?
Well, as I said, I bring that, my tone, demeanor, I guess just the way I hold myself. I think, you guys who are conducting this interview, some of you have had experience with me as a teacher, and I think some of my personality, if it hasn't rubbed off on you, you at least act a certain way around me that you may not act around other people. Just like you act a certain way around your parents that you don't act a way around your friends, and you realize there's a right and a wrong way around me too. So I think my experience in the military has lent itself to my personality and has brought that, and other people get to experience my military experience through that.
Okay, thank you. We're going to move on to some reflections. How did your military service experiences affect your life?
Well, gone through it pretty well here, in that it brought order and discipline to my life. I met my wife, who is also an Air Force veteran, so she has a lot of the same, disciplines in her life as well. We're not the same person, definitely. We had definitely different types of jobs and different types of military experiences, but she still has the base experience that I have. Without my military experience, I don't meet my wife. I don't have the family that I have today, and they're a big part of who I am. So that's part of that. When I was in high school, I had an imagination about what life was like as an adult and what adulting was like. You think I get to be responsible, so I'm going to make all the decisions and I get to do what I want and things like that. Well, the military kind of straightened that thought process out pretty quick and made me realize that I'm responsible for a lot of things and a lot of people, and that I have to take care of that. So it brought order, discipline. I pay my bills because of the experience that I've had. So, and I keep paying my bills, and that's the way it works.
What are some lifetime lessons you'd give to us?
I think I bring that a lot to what I do as a classroom teacher. But again, order, discipline. I talk to students a lot about organizing what they do and how they do it. And I recognize that my students aren't wearing the uniform, and they're not required to act that way. But at the same time, I like to help them understand that not doing things is much harder than actually doing things, because if you're not doing things, for instance, your classroom work, not doing things brings consequences that we really don't enjoy. Whereas doing the work brings the satisfaction that we want. So why be lazy in the beginning? Why not enjoy it afterwards?
Okay, we're going to go on to a conclusion. Thank you for taking your time to share your recollections of your military service. Is there anything you'd like to add that we have not covered in this interview?
I think as far as adding anything, I think we've covered quite a bit. I enjoy my status as a veteran probably far more than I ever thought I would. I also realized in hindsight how valuable my active service was to me in my lifetime. It's probably played the biggest role in forming the type of man I have become, more than anything else in my life. And probably not something my parents want to hear in particular, but it wasn't. I didn't have the greatest childhood, being in the military was definitely not childhood, but it was a different type of rearing that took place that really gave me a real solid foundation and gave me the confidence to stand in front of anybody and tell people what I think and tell people what I need and just be my own man. So, and there's all kinds of stories that not necessarily appropriate to share, but suffice to say, in spite of the important job that we had a lot of fun too. I guess the most amazing thing about my military service that I found, and I wondered about this as a young man, at 21, 22 years old, I'm a sergeant in the United States Air Force. I'm carrying an M16. I'm carrying 260 rounds of 5.56 NATO ammunition, and I've got magazines. I've got a radio. I've got this M16, and at 22 years old, I'm responsible on a shift for the security of an area. It was called the Gamma, the Ground Launch Cruise Missile Alert Maintenance Area, that housed a number of nuclear weapons, and these weapons were protected by a flight of young men like me who were armed with M16s, grenades, grenade launchers, M60 machine guns, all that stuff. And I was their leader. I was their boss. And at 22 years old, I'm directing 45 guys in the security of billion-dollar military resources. And the fact that the United States government entrusted me to do that, not only was I responsible for the security of these, responsible for the conduct of 45 guys who are securing these weapons and the security of those weapons, I had that responsibility, and I didn't come from the greatest place. I wasn't the guy that, you would have looked at me as a junior in high school. The government would have looked at me in junior high school and said, that's the guy we need to do this job, to protect billion-dollar assets and be responsible. And not only were they billion-dollar assets, but they were billion-dollar assets in a foreign country, because we were in England. So it was really a crazy idea. Sometimes I'd be walking around on a post check and thinking to myself, do they know who they really have that they gave a weapon to and is responsible for all this? Do they know what I did when I was 12 years old, and the kind of things I did when I was 16? And now I'm 22 and I have all this responsibility. I lived up to the responsibility. I did my job, and I think I did it very well. My evaluations bear out that I did my job very well, but I'm still fascinated by the amount of trust that we put in our young people because we've trained them to do it. And our military service today is full of our best and our brightest. Some people will say that a lot of people who serve in the military go there because they have no other place to go. I don't believe that at all. And even if it is people who go who don't have any place to go, this gives them a mission. It makes them, real men and women. And they become very, very responsible citizens, and they're our best American citizens.
What would you like people to remember from your story?
I just want to be remembered as a person who is very proud of our country, of our government, of our desire to be better as Americans, as our desire to show our leadership throughout the world, things like that. I've been lucky enough to travel in a lot of different countries and be in a lot of different places, and I can honestly say that this is the best place. This is the finest place to live. There are better places if you're a king or a queen, right? There's better places if you've got hundreds of millions of dollars, or you have that kind of access, but most of the world doesn't have that. And if you're going to be middle class or poor, definitely America is the place to be, because we do the best job with that, and we do the best job at just being Americans.
Thank you so much for taking your time to come in and share your story and your experiences with us.
Okay.
Wrap it